It's the board game industry's favorite racing game of the decade, Heat, Pedal to the Metal. It's a phenomenal mix of hand management and push-your-luck mechanics wrapped in a gorgeous bow. Every ounce of this game oozes style, and once it's up and running, it runs like a dream. Turns can be lightning quick once everyone knows what they're doing, however, getting someone new up to speed might be a bit of a challenge. So, let's learn how to teach Heat, Pedal to the Metal. As with every episode of How to Teach, there's a free teacher's guide linked in the description that you can download, print it out and keep it in the box, or save it to your phone and be ready to teach Heat wherever you go. There's a lot to cover with this one, so don't worry, the teacher's guide has an abbreviated step-by-step list of instructions to follow, so you can just enjoy the video first and you'll be all set. If someone's been in the board game world for the last few years, they've at least heard of Heat. It's kind of a hard one to avoid. It's got a big old box, not 3, not 5, but 4 giant racetracks, hundreds of gorgeously illustrated cards, and a lot of phenomenal gameplay to go with it all. You probably won't need much to convince a hobbyist to play it for the first time. However, if your gamer friend is hesitant, you might want to bring up the advanced modules with all its car customizations and weather conditions and campaigns and all that stuff you can do. That's honestly something I didn't really know about this game before giving it a shot. And if I had known that this game had even more content in the box than I first thought, I'd have been sold on it immediately. For everyone else, its gorgeous art style is probably what I'd lean on for getting someone interested in playing it who has no preconceived notions of the gameplay. If you can get them in front of one of the giant racetracks to show off the various art of the different player boards, all the cards, and the fun little race cards you get to use, that's easily the fastest way to get someone into this game. If you've got the box out, I also recommend showing off all 4 of the racetracks that come with the game. They're easily the biggest wow factor of this game's table presence, and in my experience, once the board hits the table, you're basically halfway there to giving it a full play. Need something quick and dirty to catch someone's attention? Here's a 30-second pitch you can use to get someone into the idea of taking a few laps with you. Phew! Is it hot in here? Or is it just the engine of my car as I push it harder and harder around the racetrack? Every turn, every twist, every car pass is another step closer to that elusive gold medal. In Heat, Pedal to the Metal, we're screaming around the racetrack, playing cards from our limited hand to try to carefully navigate not only the course, but the other racers. And there's no prize for crossing finish line in a pristine car, so burn that engine to push your vehicle to the limit and win the grand championship to prove that you're the greatest racer who's ever lived. Congrats to Heat, Pedal to the Metal for being one of the only games where I basically have 0 changes to the setup as seen in the core rulebook. At least when it comes to playing with new players. Like, it kinda did my job for me, so well done, rulebook. Seriously, if you haven't read the rulebook, you should. You should read the rulebook, like, right now. I'll wait. No, I won't. Something the rulebook itself recommends is, if there are more experienced players at the table, to remove a heat or 2 from their cars to level the playing field, and I don't disagree. Honestly, that's the exact kind of thing I would have came up with if the rulebook hadn't beaten me to it. Let's talk about the racetrack you use. If you're like me and constantly playing with new people, sometimes it can be frustrating to have the same starting setup over and over. It's important to remember that you should still be having fun while teaching the game, and that applies to more games than just Heat. As someone who's drastically played the USA map far more than any of the other maps, I'm giving you the okay to use a different map for someone's first game. Yes, the USA map is probably what you should start with, but honestly, the game doesn't change that much for a new player if you use a different one, and even if it does, if it keeps you more engaged with the game, that will reflect in your teach. Speaking of the racetrack, ignore placing people at the start line at random and start by putting yourself first on the line. Since you play front to back, putting your car up front makes your turn first, which will make for a good example turn for everyone else. Overall, I just gotta say, Heat, Pedal to the Metal certainly has a rulebook that's incredibly kind to newer players. The fact that it spread out the harder to understand elements into a separate rulebook and made sure players would teach themselves the core elements of the game before moving on to these is probably, in my opinion, one of the major reasons this game is such a widespread success. It's almost like setting up the players of your game to be better at teaching your game makes for more players enjoying your game. Just saying. As always, we're going to set the big 3 once we get the game set up. We're going to set the stage, set the goal, and set the expectations. For setting the stage, the 30-second pitch I gave at the start of the video pretty much covers it. It's a racing game. There's not really too much to this one thematically. What you can do is get some good racing music going on. I recommend something along the lines of drum and bass, classic rock, soundtracks from the Sonic the Hedgehog games, whatever gives you a need for speed. Maybe some Initial D. For setting the goal, again, it's a racing game. I'd like to think the question of what am I supposed to be doing is pretty self-explanatory in this instance. However, aside from win the race, you do need to specify how many laps you're doing, which is normally 2 for your first race. However, once your player count starts pushing 4 or more, I'd actually recommend suggesting just 1 lap. And something I discovered rereading the rulebook for the millionth time, the rulebook also recommends this. Great minds. The reason that you do this is depending on how quick players pick up on the mechanics and how long they take on their turns, you might be feeling ready to move on to a new racetrack once you finish the first lap, or even a new game if you got ADHD like I do. When in doubt, go with a lower lap count. Once someone crosses the finish line for the first lap, you can ask the table if they want to go 1 more lap, leaving the decision ultimately up to whoever's currently in the lead. And now it's time for setting expectations. This is actually one of the most important parts of teaching Heat, and it's going to take me a hot second to go through it all, so buckle up. That's a driving pun. There are 2 things that you need to make sure you cover right off the top: how Heat cards are going to work and how hand management is the most important part of the game. To normal people, the Heat mechanic will be very weird. At every point in this game, you're going to have to lean into the theme so that it really sticks, and that rings especially true for the Heat cards. This also ties into the hand management side of things. Throughout the game, you're going to be carefully using and discarding cards to try and keep your hand filled with the right cards at the right time. This is important to those who are more competitive, since the bulk of the strategy in this game comes down to how you manage the cards in your hand, engine, discard pile, and deck. Here's how I'd go about setting the expectations at this point. Since we're still at the start of the game and haven't covered any of the mechanics, you'll want to keep it pretty general so that you can get into the meat of the teach and bring up the specifics of Heat cards later when they're more relevant. Also, before this point, you'll also have already set the stage and the goal already, so keep that in mind as I give this long but important spiel for setting expectations. So, we're going to be racing around this track playing cards from our hands to move, and then drawing more at the end of each turn. When you run out of cards to draw from your deck, you're going to take your discard pile and shuffle it in to make a new draw deck to draw from on future turns. Before we get into anything else though, I'm going to let you in on the most important part of this game. You'll notice this little pile of fiery looking cards to the right of your draw deck. This stack of cards represents your engines, and the cards inside of it are the raw power you need to strategically use to win the race. These are the titular Heat. Think of this deck of Heat as a resource you get to spend to go faster than you normally could, and then you'll have to earn that Heat back later by cooling down if you want to keep going fast. Throughout the game, certain actions will have you pay Heat by putting some of these Heat cards into your discard pile. Later in the race, eventually those Heat cards you spent will make their way back into your hand, where they become worse than useless, and don't really do anything except for taking up space in your hand. You'll have to cool down on slower parts of the track to get rid of them and put them back into your engine where they can be used again. I'll explain how all that works in more detail in a second, but for now, just know that a lot of the strategy in this game comes from managing these Heat cards and keeping track of where they currently are, either in your engine, discard, draw deck, or your hand. Since it's your first time, there will likely be a chance that your hand is full of nothing but Heat cards at the worst possible moment, but that's okay, it happens to the best of us. Just don't let that stop you from spending Heat from time to time to go faster. Managing your hand to have the right cards at the right time is both the most important part and fun part of this game. Whew, longest spiel in the show by far. On the teacher's guide, I didn't put that whole thing on there verbatim for space reasons, and also because that'd be annoying to read at the table, but I did include a little Heat checklist to explain how to walk through the main mechanic of this game. Originally, I included a whole breakdown and analysis of setting the expectations of this game, why you say the things you do and when, but the video was getting pretty long, so if you want to see that, it's available as part of the bonus content you get for being a supporter on Patreon. Now that we've gotten all that out of the way, it's time to get into the teach. All right, he's ready to go through the intricate 9 steps of every single round of Heat pedal to the metal. That's an example of what not to say. You'll scare the normies. In reality, there's just 4 steps every player follows each round, and the other 5 are all optional and situational. Again, kudos to the rulebook for breaking it down like this first. Gotta give credit where it's due. The 4 steps you'll do every round are adjusting your gear, playing cards, moving your car, and then drawing back up to 7 cards. Steps 1 and 2 everyone does simultaneously, and then the rest of the steps revolve around one player at a time, front to back, in placement order like I mentioned during setup. Now, because refilling your hand is just such like a normal thing to do at the end of a round of a board game, if that makes sense, we're not even going to present it as one of the steps you do in the round. You're just going to say that at the end of your turn, you draw back up to 7 cards, because the fewer steps we can say a round has, the less likely people are to panic. By dropping the refill step, that reduces the number of steps a round feels like it takes down to 3, which is way less threatening than 9. I'll show you how and when to get those steps explained in a second. Now, to start off your teach, draw everyone's attention to their player mats. If you're playing with less than the maximum number of players, I recommend grabbing one of the extra player mats and using it as your teaching aid. Here's how I start off the main part of your teach once you've got everybody's attention. Alright, it's time to start your engines! This game is broken up into rounds of turns. On your turn, you'll mainly just be going through 3 easy steps, and the first 2 of those steps we all do together at the same time. And then I'll walk everyone through the rest of them one at a time. Just like real life, you gotta start by putting your car into gear. What gear you're in determines how many cards you have to play for the round. When we pick what gear we want to be at the start of each round, we can choose to go either up 1, down 1, or just stay at the same gear where we're at. Since we're all trying to blast off the starting line and you start in first gear, I recommend shifting up to second gear. At this point, you'll dramatically and intentionally shift your little gear doohickey into second gear, just to indicate that everyone should follow your lead. And then you'll continue to explain how playing cards is going to work. Since everyone should be in second gear, you'll be instructing everyone to play 2 cards. Because we're trying to get everyone into the groove of how a round works as fast as possible, we're not going to explain stress cards yet. Here's a fun little trick to the first turn. Regardless of what map you're playing on, everyone always starts more than 9 spaces from the first corner of the track. That means even with the astronomically low possibility someone gets a 4 and a 5 for their numbered cards, it's impossible to play 2 cards and overshoot the first turn with the way we're teaching it. And even if they draw all the non-speed cards, they will have at least 2 cards with a number on them. That means we can say with confidence, play 2 numbered cards from your hand and guarantee that everyone has at least 2 to play and they're not going to overshoot the corner. Here's an example. Alright, so now that we're in second gear, you're going to pick 2 cards that you have in your hand that have a number on them. I recommend the highest you've got. Try to get as close to that first corner as possible. When you've locked in the 2 cards that you want to play for the round, you're going to take them and place them face down in front of you to indicate you're ready to move on with the round. If someone asks what the other cards are in their hand during the first round, like the stress cards, just let them know that you're planning on explaining that in a second and not to worry about it. People never worry about things you tell them not to worry about. For real though, they're probably talking about stress cards, and I plan on introducing those during round 3 when everyone should be past the first turn and on the straightaway, at least on the USA map. Moving on, once everyone's got their cards down, you can start out the first round proper by revealing your cards and moving. You can quickly run through the concept of the racing line to show who's in first despite sharing the same space. For your cards, you should have also played 2 cards with a number on them just like everyone else. Feel free to not play the highest numbers in your hand so that other players can get ahead of you so they don't feel cheated that you got to start the game in first. This also has the benefit of making it so that if a player slipstreams off of you, they won't be able to pass the first corner during the first round. Here's an example of the first turn rundown. Alright, now that we've chosen what cards we're going to play, we're each going to take turns revealing our cards in position order first to last. So since I'm up first, I'll go ahead and reveal my cards. Since I played a 2 and a 3, that means I've got a speed of 5. And I just move 5 spaces. Simple as that. There's a few more things you can do on your turn, and I'll show you guys that when we get there, but for my turn, that's all I gotta do. At the end of your turn, you always draw back up to 7 cards. Now, we move on to the person currently in second. Nice and quick first turn. Remember, for pretty much any game you teach, the main goal is to always get the other players doing something as fast as possible so they don't have a chance to mentally check out. Moving on, there are some things you should be looking out for as you walk everyone through their first turn. For this first round, you're going to always ask each player after they reveal and move if they happen to have a heat card in their hand. When someone says yes, with any luck that'll be player number 2, you'll explain how cooldown works and how being in first and second gear is one of the only ways you can get heat cards out of your hand and back into your engine. You can also mention that everyone starts with just 1 in their deck and the rest are currently in their engine. Make sure to bring up, again, that cooling down is the only way to get these cards out of your hand, which is important to bring up before we talk about discarding cards later. Once a player stops moving for their turn, and happens to be behind or beside someone else, which is likely to happen on player 3's turn, you'll explain how the slipstream mechanic works, and how if you land on the space behind or beside someone else after you're done with all your movement, once per round, you can choose to move an additional 2 spaces, keeping your speed the same. Something that's important to say now, and also once or twice before the end of the game, you can always use slipstream, except when crossing the finish line at the end of the race. I would even point out the little symbol next to the finish line that says that as well. This is one of those rules that makes people salty when they forget, so make absolutely sure they can't blame it on you. Also, there's a non-zero chance, especially with higher player counts, that a player might be in a position to slipstream past the first corner on the first round of turns, and if that's the case, you can explain how speed limits on corners work at that point. Though, if it's a less competitive group, I just skip the slipstream step until next turn. The last person to move each round also gets adrenaline, which gives you 1 optional extra speed and 1 cooldown for free that round, regardless of what gear you're in. Finally, after learning about how the slipstream and adrenaline mechanics work, a player might announce that they would have played different cards at the start of the round had they known about those mechanics. In this first round, go ahead and let them swap out the cards they would rather have played. However, make sure that they know that in future rounds, you can't swap out cards after the round starts, since that's part of the mind games that comes with high-speed racing. You gotta predict what your opponent will do at every turn. Kinda literally. Now, after your first round, everyone should hopefully have a general idea of the turn structure. It's still helpful to go through player order of the upcoming round, saying this player will move first, to this player will move second, and so on. Time for the first turn! Like, turn in the track, it's the second round of turns, at least on the USA map. The first turn of the game, which may or may not be in the second round of turns. Anyways, second verse, same as the first as far as the rest of the round is concerned, but now someone's likely to go around a corner. So at the start of the round, before anyone picks out their cards, you'll need to break down how your speed for the whole round needs to be equal to or lower than the number listed on all the corners that they pass that round. Note this doesn't include the spaces that you move from a slipstream. You can also mention that if you do go over the corner speed limit, whether by choice or by accident, you pay 1 heat per speed that you're over the speed limit, and if you can't pay the heat, you pay the price instead. Actually, unless someone asks you, you really don't have to explain in detail what happens when you run out of heat, at least not until someone actually runs out. So you can just say, it's bad to not have enough heat, and don't run out, and leave it at that. After you explain how corners work and how running out of heat is bad, you can then transition into the beginning of the second round by shifting gears. You might need to explain how, if you have the cards in your hand, you can shift up again to gear 3, but remind them that they then have to play 3 cards. So if you don't have 3 numbered cards in your hand that add up to less than the speed limit for the first corner, you should probably avoid shifting up a gear this turn. It's a bit tough to determine when best to talk about stress cards. I prefer to talk to them in round 3 on the straightaway after the first turn on the USA map. I think it's the Britain map that you can explain these earlier, since there's more of a straightaway at the start. Stress cards represent lapses in concentration, causing you to move an unpredictable number of spaces on your turn. They make you draw cards from your deck until you find one that specifically has the speed symbol on it, which importantly are only on cards numbered 1 through 4. So if you play a stress card, you're always going to add 1 number in that range to your movement. During the round that you explain stress cards, that's also the round you'll want to add the discard step back into the game. The reason I hold off on explaining the discard step until now is because stress and heat cards can't be discarded. Also, there's a lot of seemingly bad cards that a player might want to discard. You might think you might want to get rid of 1s and 0s and 2s. They seem like they'd be perfect to get rid of early to get your big speed cards faster. However, that's rarely the case, and if they throw out too many low cards early, they're going to have a rough time when they hit that second corner. By the beginning of round 4, you should have hopefully touched on all the steps of the round, most of the mechanics, and everyone should be racing and having a good time. I will take a second to point out that, like always, I try to spread out the teach as much as possible. However, for heat in particular, I really like to drag out explaining the mechanics over the first few turns. However, odds are you're going to bump into one of those mechanics earlier than when I explain them. Just remember to be flexible and explain things as best as you can using what the players already know and telling them what they only need to know in the moment if a new mechanic comes up early. And remember, it's okay to tell someone that you plan on explaining something in a second if improvising your teach to that degree is just one step too much for you. Now, here's a few things to keep an eye on during the rest of the race. Monitor when someone's gone down to second or first gear to help them remember to discard their heat back into their engine. And also try to keep tabs on what people discard, as they should never discard heat and stress cards from their hand directly. A good way to keep an eye on that is to make sure the current player has finished discarding before moving on to the next player's turn, so you don't get distracted while they're getting rid of their cards and can catch mistakes before they happen. You might have noticed that we didn't talk about the boost mechanic and bonus gear shift mechanic as well. The best time to mention that someone can shift up or down an extra gear or boost and add an extra card is when someone's on a straightaway or right up against a turn. Hold off on both of those mechanics and watch for the first situation where a player could benefit from using one of those moves, as explaining it early would potentially lead to players misusing the mechanic and costing themselves heat, or worse, forgetting about it entirely because they didn't use it right when you talked about it. The last thing that might come up while you're racing is that someone might take a corner too hard and lose all their heat and spin out. There's a section in the rulebook that walks you through what to do. Depending on how far back they are though, you can potentially make this more forgiving so that they don't get too demoralized. You probably still want them to downshift to first gear, but you can also potentially let them discard their whole hand as well, since they probably didn't have great cards to begin with. You also can let them keep whatever heat they had in their engine at the time if they were really struggling as well. Like, if you're in last place and you spin out trying to catch up, that's probably a good time to ease up on the punishment for spinning out. On the other hand, if they got cocky and spun out on the first corner, them's the breaks. Kinda literally, actually. So, you've gotten through your first race of Heat Pedal to the Metal. Well done! It's not too bad once you got everyone into the groove, right? But as you can see, there's a ton of ways to spread out that teach to make it as smooth of an experience as possible and avoid info dumping right at the start of the race. Now, a normal video might end here, but I want to walk you through how to teach the other modules and modes in the box as well, because the teach doesn't end after the first game, you know. If you were just here to learn the basics of teaching the game, this is where you can hop off. Thank you so much for watching, and come back if you want to introduce your group to the advanced rules. Don't forget there's a free printable teacher's guide in the description for you to use. Just a heads up though, the advanced stuff isn't on the teacher's guide because it's both not as complicated as you think, and also I just didn't have room on the page for all of it. If you happen to want a teacher's guide for the advanced mechanics, I can make one, just let me know in the comments, and if the demand is there, I will definitely be throwing one together. So one of the most fun and interesting parts of the advanced rules is the car building mechanics seen in the garage module. Wow, that's hard to say. Garajule. These are different types of upgrade cards that you get to draft at the beginning of the game and replace the starting normal upgrade cards for your deck that you use for each player. These upgrade cards let you do cool things like break around corners, cool down while in higher gears, go through your discard, adjust the speed limit, make your slipstreams way more effective, and lots more. There's an entire overview on page 3 of the advanced rulebook as to what the different upgrades do for you in game. But honestly, you'll probably get more out of the summary on the bottom of the next page, or even better, the symbol reference sheet on the back of the advanced rulebook, which also has other information that you will want to read for the rest of the modules in the later parts of the advanced rulebook. As for how you run this module, I recommend mostly everyone have played the base game beforehand, though honestly, if you're tired of teaching the base game over and over, and you're playing with people that have more experience with complicated games, you can give everyone 1 to 3 random basic upgrade cards. It'll give you the experience of having everyone in their own unique card without having to do the drafting phase and knowing what every card does before you play. You'll just have to be prepared to give a quick explanation the first time everyone plays their unique card. If you do go that route, I recommend having the advanced rulebook out and available for people to just look at, so when they see the symbols, they know what they mean on their cards without having to directly ask you every single time. As for setup, there are 2 sets of upgrade cards, basic and advanced. Obviously use the basic ones the first time you introduce this one to your group. Then after a game or 2 of that, you can just mix in the advanced ones. The advanced ones honestly aren't too much more complicated. Most of the complexity is just because almost all of them are just combinations of 2 symbols or more. The worst of them adds this stupid accelerate icon. I don't even know where it is. There it is. The worst of them adds this accelerate icon, which gives you 1 extra speed for every plus symbol you played this turn, like the ones you get on stress cards and when you boost. There's also cards that like add or subtract the speed limit on the corners you take during the round you play it, which makes sense if you think about it. Higher speed limits are faster, lower is slower. That makes sense when I say it out loud, but finding out that you can subtract or add 1 to the speed limit is kind of confusing the first time you read through that, since you don't typically get to do that in real life. Except in Texas. If you're not mentally adding 10 to the speed limit, you will get shot. If you're looking to draft the cards properly at the start of the game, there's a breakdown of how to do that on page 4 of the advanced rulebook. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's like just a snake draft, beginning with whoever's starting the race and last, and then you work your way up first, and then back and forth again, and then everyone gets 3 cards total. The rulebook will tell you how to set up and discard the cards between the 3 rounds of drafting. You pretty much just explain what to do at each step, so I don't think there's really a need to go through that part in regards to how to teach it. The most complicated part is just having to explain the cards as they come up. What I will mention though is that when actually using these fancy upgrade cards in-game, the order of operations is to always activate stress cards and boosts before doing anything else. So any cards that let you pick a speed value for the turn, you don't have to decide those until after you've gone through all the randomness first. Now, how's the weather? The weather module is actually pretty straightforward. It'll change the starting conditions for your deck, such as adding or removing stress and heat cards from the game for everyone, or putting heat straight into your deck or discard at the start of the race. Where weather gets complicated is the road condition tokens. In the box, there are these tiny square road condition tokens. You draw one at random for each sector of the track, otherwise known as the spaces between each corner. You don't have to count these out, by the way. There's a little info box on each track that tells you how many turns there are and therefore how many tokens to draw. There are 2 types of road conditions, corner effect and sector effects, which either apply to just the corner or the space in the sector respectively. Each sector has 2 little tents where you can place these tokens right on them, either right next to the corner or in the middle of the sector. However, I think the middle tents are dumb because you kind of need to know about the effect the moment you enter the sector, aka on the corner. So I always put them on that tent so you don't forget when they come into play. You only ever have 1 per sector anyway, so I honestly don't know why they have 2 different spots for these. When playing with the weather effects, the point where you explain them is when people enter one of those sectors. I recommend, if you want an easier teach, to make sure that the corner before the starting line is a corner effect so that the sector you start in doesn't have anything you have to explain right away. This is useful if you're also introducing the garage module at the same time, which means you'll probably want a few rounds to get through everyone's upgrade cards before wanting to go through the weather effects on top of that. Last little note about the road condition tokens. There is a weather sector effect, which has a different effect based on what the weather token happens to be for that race. Each weather token has a specific effect that it applies to the sector if it happens to have the weather effect token on it. The weather sector effects are all pretty straightforward, and the symbols are also on the back of the advanced rulebook. Almost all the weather effects are explainable as you get to them, so just explain them when they come up and you'll be fine. Or, if you want that mechanic described in rhyme, remember whatever the weather makes you weather, whether the roads are wetter or weathered, the effect of that sector is tethered to the weather for whenever you get there together. These are the kinds of things I cut during editing. We're almost done. There are only 2 more things to talk about in the advanced rules, the legend system and the championship system. As far as teaching these systems go, they are all pretty much done outside of gameplay before the start of the race, or are entirely controlled by one player during the race, which should probably be you, the person who's hopefully read the rules. Have you read the rules, by the way? You should really do that before watching these videos. Anyways, there's not really a need to break down these systems for players over the course of a race, since you'll naturally just explain all the changes to the game before you start. Or in the legend systems case, you barely have to explain anything at all, since it can entirely be controlled by one player. Instead, I'm just going to give you how to introduce these systems to players going through them for the first time. The legend system is basically an automated racer that you can chuck into the mix to add some non-player controlled competition to any race. You can put as many as you want into the race as well. It supports however many friends you don't have. They move based on these cards that you keep on their own little playmat. I've honestly never used them in a race with other people, but I have played with them in a single player mode, and they're pretty straightforward since they don't boost or have heat to manage or anything like that. Though, interestingly enough, you can still slipstream off them. The championship system is a little campaign mode that you can play. There are 3 mini campaigns with 3 to 4 races each. By this point, if you've played a game or 2 with the garage and weather modules, everyone at the table will be familiar with all the rules that are present when using the championship system. The singular change to the rules is that you only draft 1 new upgrade card at the beginning of each race in the campaign, and you'll be using the same deck between each race so that your car grows as the campaign goes on. As far as new-ish mechanics that are added, there are 3: event cards, sponsorship cards, and the press corner. As for the event and sponsorship cards, you'll explain those at the start of the race. The events are the unique setups for each race in the campaign, and they usually add a little goal, either a way to gain additional sponsorship cards, or changes to hand size, or ways to gain extra points for your score in the campaign, or the starting conditions, etc. Read it out loud, do what it says, and it shouldn't be a problem for the table to follow along with at this point. A handy thing they also do is have the steps that you take for setting up each race listed on the side. So draft a new upgrade, deal out a new sponsorship card that starts the game in your hand, and then set up the press corner and the weather for the round. Sponsorship cards are super easy to explain. They're these one-time use upgrade cards, and you just get rid of them instead of putting them into your discard pile. Easy as that. For the press corner, the event card will tell you what corner of the racetrack to put them on. All you have to explain is that passing that corner, going 2 over the speed limit without spinning out, or using Slipstream to pass through that corner, immediately lets you draw a new sponsorship card. You can hold off on explaining this for now and how it works until someone passes the corner before the one that has the press on it. And with that, I think you're ready to teach some Heat Pedal to the Metal. Easily one of the most complicated games I've gone through on the channel so far, so you've got to let me know what you think in the comments below. And as a reminder, there is a free downloadable teacher's guide available through my Patreon. You don't have to be a supporter or a free member. It's available to everyone. I think you don't even need an account. You can print it out and leave it in the box as a guide for the next time you teach it, or just save it to your phone and be ready to teach the game whenever. And while you're going to the Patreon, just so you know, patrons get to vote on future games. Why did I say it like that? And while you're going to the Patreon, just so you know, patrons get to vote on future games that I cover. So if you've got a favorite game that you struggle to get to the table, or just like what I do here, consider throwing a few bucks a month at me. Patrons also get exclusive bonus content for every video as well, so if you just can't get enough of me, there's more where that came from. Alrighty, that's all I've got. Thank you for watching, and best of luck on the racetrack. Can I just say that it's tricky to write a script of a racing game using the word turn? Because like taking a turn and like the next turn can mean like a player's turn, or like a turn is like a bend on the track. Do you know how difficult it is? You can't say turn when talking about a board game.